You can spot me in the city, build a lobby with a sawed-off shotty screaming, drop it, this a robbery. What's up, my people? This is ShowBizz the Adult. I wanted to talk about two subjects. One, Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder. Two, my thoughts on Terence Crawford and a potential matchup against Errol Spence. Let's talk about Anthony Joshua against Deontay Wilder. According to Eddie Hearns, the negotiations are going well. And it looks as though they're already setting a date or looking towards the date of October or November. Why? Because Canelo Alvarez and Triple G has the September bout. Also, Eddie Hearn has announced that he was looking at a stadium out there by Wales, and that's Cardiff City Stadium. Okay, so it looks as though they have a location for the bout, and they're looking at a possible date, meaning that the negotiations are towards the end and starting to wrap up. I know that it took a long time. Hold on, wait a minute. Put a pin in that. Has anyone heard the new Nas album? Yo. The cop shot the kid, 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 the cop. I know it took a long time for the negotiations. I thought that the fight was going to happen regardless, and I thought having the negotiations so transparent was a very brilliant thing. It got a lot of people involved. People were already choosing sides on who was scared, who was running and stuff like that, including myself. So I think that was good for the hype of the fight, and I think that they didn't drag it on too long. If so, people were going to lose interest in the bout. Now, let's talk about Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence. Have you heard what Terence Crawford team been saying? Trainers like Bo Mack, what they've been saying? Dude, they sound like sharks in the water. They're looking at Errol Spence like, yeah, we want that fight, and it looks as though they're aggressively pursuing it. Terence Crawford, he wants Errol Spence. He wants that notch under his belt, and he thinks it's great for his legacy, and he wouldn't want it easy. Terence Crawford wants to fight the best, and he feels that Errol Spence, there's no reason why he shouldn't be his next opponent. So does Bo Mack. Also, I heard Bob Arum saying that that fight is highly probable. As far as Errol Spence, how Errol Spence sounds, he sounds the same way. And I quote, Errol Spence saying that he's just going to beat him up. Errol Spence is saying, yeah, that dude has skills, but I'm just too physical for him. I'm just going to walk in there and beat him up. And that is what the boxing game been missing. I do love Floyd Mayweather. I think he's an all-time great fighter. But he had a style where the fighters were like, he wanted the fighter to be a businessman. And I definitely understand that. But the sport is best when the fighters act like fighters. Now, I've been thirsting for the Hagler-Hearns days. And I'm not talking about the fight itself. I'm talking about the attitude, which is why I always rag down on Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman sounded like, well, you know, let this guy get a little better. Let's hype up the fight. Let's build. He was talking from the perspective that was really... it just was a put off, okay? How about speaking from the gut as a fighter? And that right there gets my blood boiling. That is why I love boxing, and it's my favorite sport. I like when fighters act like fighters. And how Errol Spence is sounding, talking about he's just going to beat up Terence Crawford, and how Terence Crawford and Bo Mack is sounding, talking about, hey, look, man, we want that fight and we aggressively pursuing it. Dude, Bo Mack is saying that Terence Crawford is just too much for that dude, and he's going to wear him out, and he see his weaknesses. Dude, stuff like that, I love, because everybody's stuck in Errol Spence. But for Terence Crawford to come from 140, here's the problem, though. Here's the thing that I learned. I learned that Terence Crawford fought at welterweight in the amateurs. But I love it. You had people like truly Sean Porter avoiding Errol Spence, okay, saying that he wanted the belt, but he was looking somewhere else. Danny Garcia and Keith Thurman. There's a lot of people, Keith Thurman avoiding Errol Spence. He had Errol Spence sound like the boogeyman. But then you have somebody like Terence Crawford pursuing Errol Spence. That is what we need in boxing. We don't have to wait for that fight to build. No, we can have that fight, their next fight. They both fought in June. Errol Spence is fighting today. Terence Crawford fought last week. They can fight next, and like I've been saying before, it doesn't have to be a one-time thing. If it's a great fight, You can have trilogies. Okay, this whole thing of, oh man, we have two great fighters, so we have to wait for it to build and push it out later so it could be this mega fight. That is crap. They should be fighting when they're both at their prime. And if it's a great fight, they could run it back. And there's enough sharks in the water. Sean Porter and Danny Garcia, they're fighting this summer. Okay, so Terence Crawford and Errol Spence can fight, and then we can have Errol Spence against Sean Porter, Terence Crawford against Danny Garcia, Sean Porter against Terence Crawford, Errol Spence against Danny Garcia. I mean, Keith Thurman against, I mean, dude, look, it doesn't have to, I like the way they're sounding, and I think that's great for the sport. So I'm already hyped up for just the potential, and they're talking like it's inevitable, and I love it because they both got their eyes on the same prize, and that's to unify. So I'm going to give them a huge thumbs up for how they're sounding, and really, I don't have a horse in the race. I don't want a horse in the race. I love them both for sounding like fighters and aggressively pursuing each other, and that fight may be next. So I'm already excited. ShowBizz the adult. I'm out.
Spot me in the city, building lobby with a sawed-off shotty, screaming, drop it, this a robbery.